What if your definition of love was shaped by the person who hurt you first? Not physically, not with words necessarily, but with silence, with distance, with conditional affection. What if everything you crave today, validation, approval, closeness, was once offered in fragments by someone who also held the power to take it away? You wouldn't recognize it as trauma. You'd call it home. That's how it begins. Before you even learn how to speak, you absorb your first language, emotion. You study expressions, tones, absences, and in the process, your nervous system becomes fluent in one person, your mother. She is not just a caretaker. She is the blueprint. Her presence defines what feels safe. Her absence defines what feels dangerous. Her smile teaches reward. Her withdrawal teaches punishment. And slowly you learn that love isn't something you are. It's something you earn. This isn't about blame. This isn't about villainizing the mother. This is about uncovering the origin of the ache you keep reliving. The confusion that whispers, why do I always feel like I'm not enough? Why do I stay in places where I'm emotionally starved? Because your earliest definition of love was fused with survival. And the irony is, what wounded you is what you now seek. Not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. You're not looking for healing. You're looking for the emotional landscape that shaped you. Until you understand the mother, not just the woman, but the role she played in constructing your emotional world, you will keep calling your wound love. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind, he studied the invisible hands that mold it. And one of those hands, perhaps the most powerful of all, is the one we call mother. But Jung never viewed the mother purely as a person. He called it the mother archetype, a symbolic force that lives in every psyche, shaping how we experience comfort, danger, dependence, and identity. She is not just your biological mother. She is a myth that lives inside you, one that determines how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and how you interpret reality itself. This is what Jung called the mother complex, a psychic imprint formed in early childhood that can manifest in different, often contradictory ways. Some people over-identify with their mother, living in emotional loyalty, never developing a separate sense of self. Others rebel endlessly, trying to escape her influence while unconsciously repeating her patterns. Some seek her presence in every partner. Others avoid emotional closeness altogether, afraid of being consumed again. The mother complex doesn't always feel destructive. Sometimes it feels warm, familiar, even safe. But what it always does, subtly, persistently, is limit you. It distorts your perception of the world because it taught you what the world was supposed to feel like. If your mother was inconsistent, you might mistake unpredictability for passion. If she was cold, you might associate love with distance. If she was overly protective, you might fear independence as betrayal. You think this is just a story about your mother, but it's not. It's about every decision you've made since, every relationship you've repeated, every silent rule you obey. The truth you've been avoiding is just ahead. Jung believed that the unconscious mind doesn't differentiate between past and present. It reacts to what feels familiar. And for many, that means walking through life with a lens crafted by childhood. Reacting not to the world as it is, but to the world as it once felt long ago. Until you identify that lens, you remain inside it. The mother complex isn't about blaming your mother. It's about understanding how deeply her presence or absence shaped the emotional logic of your life. She became your emotional language, and every relationship since has spoken in her dialect. To awaken is to translate, to step back and ask, is this love or is this memory? You were told it was love, the long silences, the sharp tone, the moments when her warmth would suddenly vanish. You learned to tiptoe, to adjust, to perform, because sometimes if you behaved just right, the sun came out again. But that wasn't love. That was survival. Many children grow up in environments where love is not freely given. It's conditional. It's a reward for obedience, a gesture to maintain control, or worse, a weapon used to induce guilt. Over time, this doesn't just shape how you feel about your mother. It rewires how you experience love altogether. You start believing love must be earned, That closeness comes with a cost. That being seen requires shrinking first. Emotionally unavailable mothers don't always scream. They don't always hit. Sometimes they simply don't look at you. They withhold warmth when you displease them. They praise you only when you perform. They love you, but with strings attached. And as a child, you don't question the strings. You learn to climb them. You begin to associate care with anxiety, comfort with tension. And when affection comes, it feels less like a gift and more like relief from punishment. This psychological conditioning becomes a blueprint. You carry it into adulthood without realizing. You chase people who make you feel the same. Unpredictable, distant, hard to read. You call the confusion chemistry. You think the anxiety means you care. But what you're really feeling is the echo of childhood. You stay in relationships that deplete you because you've mistaken familiar pain for deep connection. You overextend, overgive, over-apologize, hoping one day someone will finally say, "You've done enough." You are enough, but they never do. Because you're not chasing people. You're chasing a feeling, one you never truly received, but were taught to work for. This is the illusion of nurture, where guilt wears the mask of love and survival becomes a ritual. To break it, you must ask yourself, would I still call it love if it didn't hurt? If I didn't have to earn it? If the answer feels uncertain, it's not because you're broken. It's because no one ever showed you what unconditional love actually looks like. Only what it costs. What happens when you are never allowed to become your own person? There are mothers who do not see their children as separate beings, but as extensions of themselves. Their moods, dreams, and values bleed into you. You are not raised, you are absorbed, not loved for who you are, but shaped into who they need you to be. This is emotional enmeshment, and it's far more common than anyone admits. It begins innocently. A parent who's too involved, too worried, too invested in your life. But beneath that involvement is a subtle theft of your independence, your desires, your emotional clarity. You learn to anticipate their needs before your own. You regulate your emotions to avoid theirs, and slowly you lose track of where you end and where they begin. In enmeshed households, love is not nurturing, it is consuming. You're praised for similarity, punished for separation. If you express difference, it's treated as betrayal. If you try to individuate, you're labeled selfish, cold, or ungrateful. So you internalize one dangerous lesson. In order to be loved, I must not be me. Even rebellion isn't freedom, it's reaction. You define yourself against them, but you're still trapped within their emotional gravity. You don't choose your life, you run from theirs. That's not autonomy. That's entrapment with extra steps. And the worst part? You think the problem is you. You think you're too sensitive, too distant, too emotionally complicated. But in truth, you were never given the psychological space to become whole. You were trained to orbit another person's emotional world, to live their unlived dreams, to heal their unhealed wounds. That's why boundaries feel like guilt. Why saying no feels like harm. Why you feel responsible for everyone else's comfort, except your own. You're not broken. You were just never separate. And until you reclaim that separation, every decision you make, no matter how far you run, will be a continuation of the system you never chose to be part of. You moved out, you changed cities, you stopped calling, but somehow, her voice is still there. Not as words you remember, but as feelings you can't explain. The hesitation before speaking, the guilt after saying no, the sudden urge to apologize for simply existing. These aren't just quirks of personality, they're remnants, fragments of a voice that programmed your inner world before you even understood language. Because here's what no one tells you. The voice in your head isn't always yours. It's built from the voices that shaped you, especially the one that came first. The mother's voice becomes the internal narrator. If she was nurturing, that voice may guide you with safety. But if she was critical, anxious, or inconsistent, that voice becomes a weapon you turn on yourself. You call it self-doubt. But it's not. It's inherited insecurity. You call it perfectionism. But it's not. It's a survival strategy you develop to avoid emotional punishment. You call it people-pleasing. But it's not. It's the child in you still trying to earn affection through obedience. This internal programming is so deep, you mistake it for identity. You think you're naturally anxious, overly responsible, emotionally sensitive. But what if these weren't your traits? What if they were coping mechanisms disguised as character? Your mind remembers everything it had to do to feel safe, and those methods didn't disappear when you became an adult. They just evolved. They followed you into your relationships, your work, your silence. They echo every time you ask yourself, am I too much? Am I not enough? And because this echo comes from inside, you trust it. You obey it. You let it define who you are and what you deserve. But it isn't the voice of reason. It's a memory. And healing doesn't begin with changing your thoughts. It begins with questioning where those thoughts came from. Because until you do, you'll keep living your life through a script that was never written by you. It was written for you, by someone who may have meant well, but never truly saw who you were becoming. You think you're choosing partners, friends, mentors, lovers. But what if you're not? What if it's not love you're seeking? What if it's familiarity? This is the cruel trick of the subconscious. It doesn't crave healing, it craves recognition. It leads you, again and again, not toward what nourishes you, but toward what feels known, even if what's known is chaos. That's why so many people with unresolved mother wounds find themselves in relationships that feel disturbingly similar to the emotional climate of their childhood. Partners who are distant, friends who guilt you, bosses who withhold approval, and you perform, you please, you prove. You shrink yourself to avoid rejection, just like you did back then. You might call it a pattern, but it's more than that. It's a psychic loop, a repetition compulsion. The emotionally unavailable mother becomes the template for the lover who doesn't text back. The overly critical mother becomes the voice of the partner who constantly finds faults. The overbearing mother becomes the friend who controls you with guilt. The colleague who dominates your decisions. The partner who mistakes love for possession. You tell yourself, this time will be different. But it never is, because deep down, you're not choosing based on compatibility. You're choosing based on emotional memory. You're not looking to be loved. You're looking to be understood by someone who speaks the emotional language you learned from her. Even if that language is cold, distant, conditional. That's why healthy love feels boring. Safe people feel uninteresting. Peace feels suspicious. Because your nervous system doesn't recognize those things as home. This is the reality. You are not repeating relationships. You are repeating an emotional state, a specific cocktail of anxiety, guilt, hope, and scarcity that once defined what love felt like. And until you become conscious of that, you will keep walking into the same rooms with different faces. Healing starts when you stop asking, why do they always treat me this way? And start asking, why does this feel so familiar? Why do I stay? Because nothing will change until you recognize what you've been recreating. Children don't see flawed parents. They see themselves as the flaw. If your mother was distant, you assumed you weren't lovable. If she was angry, you believed you must have done something wrong. If she withheld affection, you told yourself you didn't deserve it. This is the tragedy of childhood. We internalize everything. We make their chaos our fault, their coldness our failure, their emotional absence our shame. Because as a child, it's safer to believe you're the problem than to face the terrifying truth that the person responsible for your safety might not be safe. So you carry the burden, quietly, subconsciously. You become hyper-aware of your impact on others. You apologize for existing. You strive for perfection, not out of ambition, but out of fear that imperfection means rejection. This isn't personality. This is inherited shame. It shows up as self-doubt in your accomplishments, as guilt in your boundaries, as panic when you disappoint someone, even slightly. You think you're being humble, thoughtful, considerate, but what you're really doing is trying not to trigger the punishment you once knew too well. And the cruelest part? You don't even question where the shame came from. You think it's yours. You think it's who you are, but it's not. It was passed down to you like a family heirloom, unspoken, unexamined, unchallenged. Healing begins the moment you stop carrying shame that doesn't belong to you. The moment you realize, Her anger was hers. Her sadness was hers. Her silence was hers. You were just the mirror, not the cause. And now, you don't have to hold what was never yours to carry. Say something unkind about your mother and watch how fast the room turns on you. She did her best. You only get one mother. You should be grateful. These phrases aren't comfort, they're censorship. We live in a culture that sanctifies mothers, not as human beings, but as untouchable symbols of virtue. We are taught that to question your mother is to betray her, that to speak of her flaws is to expose your own. But what if that silence is the reason so many people never heal? When we turn motherhood into a sacred role, we create a world where maternal harm becomes unspeakable, where emotional neglect is minimized, where controlling behavior is excused as protection, where trauma is dismissed because it came from someone who meant well. This cultural idealization forces victims of maternal wounding into isolation. They carry their pain in silence, convinced they are the problem, convinced that speaking up makes them bad sons, bad daughters, bad people. But silence does not protect love. It protects legacy. And legacies, when built on unspoken trauma, do not empower families. They imprison them. To heal, we have to challenge the narrative. Yes, mothers are often selfless. Yes, they carry immense burdens, but they are not exempt from causing harm. And acknowledging that harm does not erase their humanity, it restores yours. You are not ungrateful for telling the truth. You are not disloyal for seeking clarity. You are not broken for needing distance from someone who shaped your pain. The real betrayal isn't in what you say, it's in what you're told you can't say. And the sooner we stop worshiping the idea of the perfect mother, the sooner we can start loving the real, flawed, complex humans that raised us, with honesty instead of illusion. This isn't about blame. It never was. Healing the mother wound doesn't require hatred, confrontation, or exile. It requires one thing: understanding, not just of her, but of the systems that shaped her, the silence she inherited, the fears she absorbed, the roles she was forced to play before she even understood who she was. Because before she was your mother, she was someone's daughter. Maybe she was raised to suppress her emotions. Maybe she was taught that obedience was safety. Maybe she too had to earn love from someone who never gave it freely. And when it came time for her to raise you, she gave you what she had, whether it was enough or not. You're not the only one who never learned how to love safely. She didn't either. This doesn't excuse the pain, but it explains the pattern. And that's the key, because cycles don't end through punishment. They end through awareness. When you recognize what was passed down to you, you gain the power to choose differently, to speak where she stayed silent, to feel what she buried, to love in a way she never got to experience. This is not revenge, it's repair, not rebellion, but reclamation. You don't have to hate her to heal from her. You just have to stop confusing loyalty with silence and recognize that understanding her story is the first step in reclaiming your own. There comes a moment when you realize she's not coming back, not the mother you needed, not the apology you waited for, not the version of her that finally sees you. And in that moment, something shifts. You stop reaching for the door she never opened. You stop begging for love from hands that didn't know how to hold it. You stop explaining your pain to someone who never learned how to hear it. That's the beginning, not of anger, not of bitterness, but of something far more powerful: self-parenting. You become the one who validates your feelings, the one who tells you you were never too much, the one who says you deserve softness, you deserve to be protected, and you say it not with rage, but with love. Because the truth is, you can't rewrite the past, but you can stop repeating it. You can stop living like you're still waiting for permission to be whole. Carl Jung believed that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget, before you became a reaction, before your worth was tied to someone else's mood. You are not her echo. You are not her wound. You are not her second chance. You are your own beginning. And when you choose to give yourself what she could not, you don't just break the cycle, you step out of it. You return to yourself, not as a child, but as a creator. And for the first time, maybe ever, you are finally home. Healing begins with awareness, but it doesn't end there. If this resonated with you, give it a like. Share it with someone who's still calling their wound love. And subscribe for more stories that help you remember who you were before the world told you who to be.